Brilliant. So I made myself laugh with this, and I'm hoping I'm seeing a few people who get this. For record, this is a bloke called The Rock, and I amused myself preparing this one day. So we're thinking a bit about what it means for Peter to be called The Rock, which is a name we heard he was given in our reading. But he gets this name because he speaks in response to Jesus' question, "Who do you say I am?" And it's because Peter recognises and proclaims that Jesus is the Son of the living God. So to start us off, if we jump onto the next slide, anyone know what this is meant to vaguely represent? You might see them when you're out walking. It's not the best one, but it was what I could get copyright free. So has anyone heard of a thing called a cairn? So what they are is they're a pile of stones that you can find when people are out walking. And they kind of begin with one foundation stone, and they're all built up from that. So if you're going to humour me in something for a moment, you've got some rocks on your table. Just try if you can for 30 seconds just to get them into a pile. Go for it. The higher the tower, the more points. Okay, I'm going to stop you there. How high has anyone got? How high has anyone got? Give me a number. 3. Anyone beat 3? Oh, how high? We've got 4. Anyone beat 4? Oh, so close. Right. What kind of stone did you choose for the bottom? Flat. Something quite flat, something quite stable, something which you thought could hold up the others. Now, the reason I've deliberately chosen this particular picture is because if you look at kind of the first stone that's been put down, I'm not convinced I'd have chosen that one, given that there's quite a precarious balancing act going on. And one of the things I love about Peter being called the Rock is we like to kind of imagine him as this perfect person sometimes off that, but he's not. Just last week, we were hearing about kind of the bumps and the rough bits and the jagged edges in his life. The stuff which, I've made a rough my own back now, the stuff which doesn't work out. And God doesn't necessarily always choose the people and the pieces we might think to work with. He chooses all kinds of people with rough and jagged edges and imperfect parts, and they're the people that he uses to build his church. So Peter isn't perfect, but there is a reason he is chosen. And it's because he knows who Jesus is and because of his faith. Peter does and will continue to do some ill-advised things as well as doing some pretty fantastic things along the way. But Jesus will still call Peter the rock on which his church is built because Peter knows who Jesus is and will build his life on him. You may have noticed that Peter starts off in this passage called Simon Peter, and it can be a bit confusing reading the Gospels because his name flits about a bit. Sometimes he's Simon, sometimes he's Peter, sometimes he's Simon Peter. So Peter begins life as Simon, and Jesus deliberately renames him. So Peter means rock in Greek, or a word similar to rock in Greek. And Jesus renames him because that's quite a big thing that happens in the Bible. When someone is renamed, it says something about God's plans and purposes for them. Into kind of all the stuff of life, God speaks a truer word about who he has made a person to be, who they are in him, and what that means for his plans and purposes for their life. If you look back at my little picture up here, there's another reason this cairn is still standing. It's because if you look at the stone underneath which someone has begun building on, it's good, it's solid, and it's flat. And Peter might be the rock on which the church was built, but he is not the foundation. This good and perfect foundation Jesus stands on is Jesus, the only one who is perfect and true and good. And Peter can confidently say to Jesus, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God," because he has seen who he is. It is knowing who Jesus is, which means Peter will be one on which the church is built, And it is because he knows who Jesus is, Peter will be given the power he needs to fulfill his role. Because the good news is he's not left alone to do it on his own. Peter cannot be Peter, the rock, on his own. A few sentences later, if you read on, you'll see him referred to as "get behind me." Satan, actually, it's quite blunt. He's referred to as Simon off and on as well, because Peter needs Jesus to continually love and empower him to be this rock on which the church is built. He needs his help, and he needs the faith which he brings. Peter is chosen, despite his imperfections, to take a founding role, though, in God's church. Not Peter's church, not your church, not my church, but God's church. And God, in his strange and mysterious wisdoms, loves to work in the gloriously inefficient way of using imperfect people with jagged edges and rough bits, like you and me. So my question, which I'm going to give you a bit of time to ponder, is who do you say this Jesus is? And what does that mean about your life and how you live? And the other one I'm going to leave you with, you can go down either who Jesus is. The other one is, what has God said to you about your calling, his plans and his purposes for your life and who you are? And how do those two link? Who is Jesus, and what does that mean for you? So if you look at your table, well, you know you've got stones because we've used them. We're going to use them again. We're getting good value for money out of them today. There's a couple of different ways you can respond to this. You've got some pens. If you are someone who is so creatively inspired, you might want to write or draw something about what God says to you. It could be something about who you are. It could be something about who he is. If you look at Psalm 18, there's some verses about God being the rock, if you want to maybe think a bit more on that. If the idea of doing anything creative brings you out in hives, panic not. Under your chair, you will very likely find a Bible, or if not, I'm sure some friendly person nearby will have one. If you prefer, then our passage was in Matthew 16, beginning at verse 13. Just take a bit of time to have a flick through and a read through that and think a bit deeper into that, maybe pray through that. Or if anything stuck with you which you'd like to pray through, either grab someone to pray with or take some time to pray yourself. So you have a smorgasbord of options. But the big question I'd like to leave you with, who do you say Jesus is? And what does that mean for who he says you are? So just take some time on your tables, grab the stones, grab the pens, grab the Bible, respond how feels right for you.